The air in the gas station mini-mart was thick with the scent of old coffee and sugary donuts. Outside, the Nevada sun beat down on the cracked asphalt, making the heat rise in shimmering waves. Inside, it was cool and quiet, a temporary oasis in the vast, empty desert. 4 men sat at a small, sticky table, their leather vests, or cuts, marked with the emblem of a stoic, iron-jawed wolf. They were members of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. Ghost, the chapter president, nursed a black coffee. His face was a roadmap of long miles and hard sun, but his eyes were clear and unnervingly still. Across from him, Brick, the club's sergeant-at-arms, was built like an industrial refrigerator and methodically worked his way through a powdered donut, his movements slow and deliberate. Doc, a former Navy corpsman with Doc stitched over his heart, read the ingredients on a bag of chips with professional disdain. And Shadow, the quietest of them all, simply watched the door, his gaze sweeping over the empty parking lot. It was a habit born from years in places where threats came without warning. They were just passing through, a pit stop on a long ride to a national meet. To the other lone customer in the store, a nervous salesman grabbing a soda, they were a wall of leather and steel, a silent threat best left alone. The truth was far less menacing. They were just 4 tired men enjoying a moment of peace before facing another 100 miles of blistering highway. Then the peace shattered. The glass door flew open with a crash, slamming against the metal frame. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, stumbled inside. She was barefoot, her small feet already red and scraped from the hot pavement. Her dress was smudged with dirt, and her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving clean tracks in the grime. The salesman froze, his hand halfway to the cooler. The clerk behind the counter, a teenager named Sal, dropped the magazine he was reading. His mouth hung open. The world inside the tiny store had stopped. The little girl's wide, panicked eyes scanned the room, passing over the salesman, over Sal, and landing squarely on the 4 men in leather vests. She saw their size, their patches, the grim set of their faces, but in her desperation, she saw something else too. She saw strength. She took a ragged, desperate breath and pointed a trembling finger at them. Her voice was a tiny, broken whisper that somehow filled the entire space. "Please," she begged, each word a painful gasp. "Please hide me." For a split second, silence reigned. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. The salesman took a half-step back, wanting no part of whatever was happening. Sal stood paralyzed behind his counter. They were bystanders, frozen by shock and uncertainty. But the Iron Wolves were not bystanders. Ghost's coffee cup hit the table with a soft click. He did not startle. He did not shout. He simply rose to his feet, his chair scraping quietly against the linoleum. Brick, Doc, and Shadow followed suit, a silent, coordinated movement. They had not exchanged a single word, but they all understood. A call had been made, and they were the ones who would answer. "Doc, with the kid." Ghost's voice was low, like gravel rolling downhill. "Inside." Doc nodded, his medical training kicking in. He moved toward the little girl, not with speed, but with a calm, non-threatening presence. He knelt down, making himself smaller. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's okay, we're here. What's your name?" The girl flinched but didn't run. "Mia," she whispered, her eyes still locked on the door, expecting a monster to burst through at any moment. "Okay, Mia. My name is Doc. I'm going to take you to the back where it's safe," he said, his voice a soothing balm. He gestured for Sal, the clerk, to open the door to the storeroom. Sal, jolted from his stupor, fumbled with the keys and unlocked it. Doc gently guided the terrified child into the cluttered space, away from the front windows. As the storeroom door clicked shut, Ghost, Brick, and Shadow moved toward the front of the store. They didn't run. Their steps were measured heavy with purpose. They formed a loose line just inside the glass doors, a formidable barrier of worn leather, denim, and grim resolve. Shadow peered through the glass. Black sedan. Expensive, he murmured, his eyes tracking the vehicle as it screeched to a halt beside the gas pumps. Drivers getting out. The car door opened and a man emerged. He was the picture of respectable affluence. He wore pressed khaki pants, a crisp blue polo shirt, and expensive-looking loafers without socks. His hair was perfectly styled and a designer watch glinted on his wrist. But his handsome face was twisted into a mask of ugly rage. He stalked toward the passenger side, yanked the door open, and reached inside. "Get out, Lena," he snarled, his voice carrying clearly through the closed door. "Don't you dare make a scene." A woman's voice, pleading and strained, answered him. "Marcus, please, just let us go. We'll walk." "You'll do what I tell you," he growled, his grip tightening. A woman, Lena, was half-dragged from the car. She had the same terrified eyes as her daughter. A dark bruise was already forming on her wrist where he held her. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. Ghost pushed the glass door open and stepped out into the oppressive heat. Brick and Shadow flanked him, their presence instantly changing the atmosphere of the parking lot. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken menace. Marcus looked up, his fury momentarily replaced by surprise, then annoyance. He saw three large, intimidating men in biker vests standing between him and the store. He straightened up, letting go of Lena's arm and smoothing his shirt, his entire demeanor shifting. The snarling animal was gone, replaced by a man of authority dealing with a minor inconvenience. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice now smooth and condescending, as if addressing hired help. He gave them a practiced, dismissive smile. Ghost didn't smile back. He just stood there, his stillness more intimidating than any threat. He tilted his head slightly toward Lena, who was trying to shrink into the side of the car, her gaze fixed on the ground. "That's enough," Ghost said. The words were quiet, but they cut through the air with the finality of a closing cell door. Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He clearly wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not by men he considered his social inferiors. He scoffed, regaining his composure. "I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private family matter. My girlfriend," he gestured condescendingly toward Lena, "is just a little overwrought. We had a small disagreement." He took a step toward the store, expecting them to part for him. "Now, if you'll excuse us, her daughter ran in there. She's prone to hysterics." Brick shifted his weight, a subtle movement that nonetheless blocked Marcus's path completely. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His sheer mass was a statement. Ghost's eyes never left Marcus's face. "Your family matter is spilling into our day," he said, his tone flat and cold. "And the little girl asked for help, so now it's our business." Marcus's face began to flush with anger. The mask of civility was starting to slip. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but you have no right—" "The car," Shadow interrupted, his voice a low monotone. He was holding his phone, the screen glowing in the shade of the gas station's awning. "It's registered to Lena Hayes, here in Nevada." He looked up from his phone, his eyes boring into Marcus. "Your license says you're Marcus Thorne from California. Different states, different names. Doesn't sound like a family matter to me." That was it. The pin that popped the balloon of Marcus's carefully constructed arrogance. The information was simple, public record, but the speed and confidence with which Shadow produced it threw him completely off balance. It told him these men were not the dim-witted thugs he had assumed them to be. The practiced smile vanished. The condescension evaporated. What was left was cold, reptilian fury. Marcus's eyes, which had been trying for charmingly annoyed, turned to chips of ice. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he hissed, the venom in his voice palpable. "I will have your jobs. I will ruin you." Ghost almost laughed. "We don't have jobs," he said simply. The unmasking was complete. The respectable man in the polo shirt was gone, replaced by the predator Mia had fled from. Enraged at being challenged, at losing control, Marcus made his final mistake. He abandoned words and resorted to action. "Get out of my way," he roared, and lunged, not at Ghost, but toward the door where he knew Mia was. Hiding. He intended to shove past them, to reclaim his property, to reassert his dominance through force. Bad choice. Very bad choice. He never made it to the door. Brick's arm shot out, not in a punch, but in an open-handed block that met Marcus's chest with the force of a battering ram. The air whooshed out of Marcus's lungs. Before he could even register the impact, Brick's other hand had clamped onto the front of his expensive polo shirt, twisting the fabric into a tight knot. With an almost casual lack of effort, Brick lifted Marcus off his feet and slammed him back against the side of his own sleek black car. The impact made a dull thud, the metal of the door groaning in protest. Marcus's head snapped back, his eyes wide with shock and pain. He was pinned, his feet dangling inches off the ground, held fast by one massive, unyielding hand. It wasn't a fight, it was a neutralization. Clean, efficient, and overwhelmingly absolute. The struggle was over before it had even begun. Marcus gasped for air, his face turning a blotchy red, his arrogance replaced by sputtering disbelief. "I told you," Ghost said, his voice still unnervingly calm as he walked over to the pinned man. "That's enough." Inside the store, Doc heard the commotion but didn't move from his post. He sat on an overturned bucket in the storeroom, a small island of calm in Mia's sea of terror. He had found a bottle of water and a first aid kit under the counter. "Here," he said, holding the water out to Mia. "Just take a little sip." The little girl was huddled in a corner, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was shaking uncontrollably. "Is he gone?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "My friends are talking to him," Doc said, choosing his words carefully. "They're very good talkers. You don't have to worry about him right now. Right now, you're safe." He looked at her scraped feet. "Does this hurt?" he asked, pointing to them. Mia nodded mutely. "I can help with that," Doc said. He opened the first aid kit and pulled out some antiseptic wipes and bandages. He worked with a gentle, practiced efficiency, his large, tattooed hands surprisingly delicate. He didn't rush. He explained every step he took. "This might sting for just a second," he warned before cleaning a cut. "There, all done." As he bandaged her feet, the storeroom door opened. It was Lena, her face pale but her eyes filled with a desperate hope. She rushed to her daughter, gathering her into a fierce hug. "Oh, baby, are you okay? I'm so sorry." "Mama," Mia cried, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Doc gave them a moment before speaking. "Are you injured, ma'am?" he asked Lena quietly. He had seen the bruise on her wrist. Lena looked down at her arm as if noticing the angry purple mark for the first time. He grabbed me," she said, her voice trailing off. She looked back at Doc, her eyes swimming with tears of gratitude and fear. "Is he—" "He's been detained," Ghost's voice said from the doorway. He was standing there, silhouetted against the bright light of the store. "He won't be bothering you again today." He then looked at Lena, his gaze direct but not unkind. "Not today. Not ever again. That's a promise." The certainty in his voice was absolute. For the first time in what felt like years, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in Lena's chest. She looked from Ghost's weathered face to Doc's gentle hands on her daughter, to the massive, silent form of Brick standing guard outside. These men, these terrifying-looking strangers, were her saviors. The wail of an approaching siren grew louder. Sal, the clerk, had called the sheriff as soon as Doc had taken Mia to the back. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled into the lot, parking next to Marcus's sedan. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a tan uniform got out. Sheriff Brody was a man who knew his county and everyone in it. He took in the scene at a glance. The expensive car, the well-dressed man being held against it by a mountain of a biker, two other bikers standing calmly nearby, and the gas station clerk watching with wide eyes from the doorway. "Ghost," Sheriff Brody said, his voice weary but not hostile. He knew the Iron Wolves. They passed through a few times a year. They were loud and looked like trouble, but he'd never had a single real problem with them. In fact, he'd once seen them spend 2 hours helping an elderly couple change a shredded tire on the side of the interstate. "What's going on here?" "Sheriff," Ghost nodded in greeting, "this man was assaulting the woman in his car. Her daughter ran in and asked for our help." Marcus, seeing law enforcement, found his voice again. "Officer, thank God. This man assaulted me. These thugs attacked me for no reason. I want them arrested." Sheriff Brody ignored him and looked at Brick. "You can let him go, Brick. Let him stand on his own 2 feet. Brick grunted and released his grip. Marcus stumbled, catching himself on the car, and immediately started trying to fix his shirt, a pathetic attempt to regain some semblance of dignity. "Now," Brody said, turning his full attention to Marcus, "let's hear your side." "My girlfriend and I had a fight," Marcus said, his voice dripping with self-righteous indignation. "She overreacted. Her daughter got scared. These animals got involved where they had no business. It's a simple misunderstanding that they escalated into violence." Sheriff Brody listened patiently. Then he walked over to Lena, who had come out of the store with Doc and Mia. Mia was hiding behind her mother's legs, clutching a half-empty water bottle Doc had given her. "Ma'am," Brody said gently, "I'm Sheriff Brody. Can you tell me what happened?" Lena hesitated. For years, Marcus had isolated her, controlled her, and convinced her that no one would ever believe her. He was charming, wealthy, and powerful. She was a single mother with a dead-end job. His threats echoed in her mind. "Who are they going to believe, Lena, me or you?" She looked at Marcus and saw the smug certainty on his face. He believed he was untouchable. Then she looked at Ghost, who gave her a slow, almost imperceptible nod, a look that said, "We're still here, you're not alone." That was all it took. The dam of fear and silence that had imprisoned her for so long finally broke. Feeling the solid, unshakable presence of the bikers behind her, Lena found her voice. "He's not my boyfriend," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "He's been controlling my life for a year. He took my phone, my car keys. He told me if I ever tried to leave, he would take Mia away from me and make sure I never saw her again. Today, I tried to leave. He caught us. He was dragging me back to the car when Mia ran for help." She held up her bruised wrist. "He did this. And it's not the first time." The sheriff's expression hardened. He had seen this story 100 times. The hidden abuse, the coercive control, the predator hiding behind a respectable facade. He looked from Lena's tear-streaked, determined face to Marcus's sputtering outrage. He knew who he believed. "Sir," he said to Marcus, his voice now devoid of any warmth, "turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus's face went white. "You can't be serious. I haven't done anything. I'll call my lawyer. You have no idea who my father is." "I'm sure I'll find out," Brody said flatly. As he clicked the handcuffs shut, Marcus twisted his head to glare at Lena, his face a contorted mask of pure hatred. "You will regret this, Lena," he snarled, his voice a low, vicious promise. "You can't hide from me. I will find you. I will take her from you, and you will have nothing." The threat hung in the hot, still air. Lena flinched, the old fear coiling in her stomach. Mia began to cry again. Before the sheriff could respond, Ghost took a slow step forward until he was standing right beside the open door of the police cruiser where Marcus was being placed. He leaned down, his face just inches from Marcus's. "No, you won't," Ghost said. His voice was a dead calm whisper, more terrifying than any shout. "You're going to forget her name. You're going to forget her daughter's name. You're going to forget this town and this road, because if you ever try to find them, if you even think about them, you won't be dealing with him." He nodded at the sheriff. "You'll be dealing with us, and we'll be waiting." The look in Ghost's eyes was not one of anger. It was a promise, a statement of fact. Marcus, for all his bluster, saw it. He saw the abyss behind those eyes, and for the first time in his life, he felt true, gut-wrenching fear. He shrank back into the seat of the cruiser, silent. The sheriff slammed the door shut and gave Ghost a long, appraising look. He didn't approve of the threat, not officially, but he didn't disapprove either. He just nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. "Thanks for your help," he said to the bikers. "We'll take it from here." As the cruiser pulled away, taking Marcus with it, a fragile silence descended on the gas station. The immediate danger was gone, but the larger threat lingered. Lena stood there, holding her daughter, looking lost. She had no car, no phone, and very little money. She had escaped, but she was stranded. "Sal," Ghost called out to the clerk, who was still standing in the doorway, "can we use your storeroom for a bit and get these ladies something to eat, whatever they want? Put it on our tab." Sal, now looking at the bikers with something akin to hero worship, nodded eagerly. "Yeah, of course. Anything you need." Later that evening, in a pair of adjoining motel rooms on the edge of the small town, the Iron Wolves held an informal meeting. Lena and Mia were asleep in one room, finally safe and exhausted. In the other, the four bikers sat around a small table. "The restraining order will be temporary," Shadow said, scrolling through his phone. "This guy Thorne has money. His father is a big-shot real estate developer in California. He'll have a team of lawyers who will paint Lena as unstable. He'll be out on bail by morning." A younger member of the club, a prospect named Rookie, who had been waiting with their bikes, spoke up hesitantly. "So, we're done here, right? We helped her. The cops have him. It's not really our problem anymore." Brick turned his massive head and fixed Rookie with a glare that could curdle milk. The prospect shrank back. Ghost held up a hand. "It became our problem the second that little girl asked for help," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "We don't leave things half-finished. A promise was made." He looked at each of his men. "She's under our protection now. That means she gets a permanent solution." There were no more objections. The code was the code. It was absolute. "Shadow," Ghost continued, "I need you to find us an apartment, another state, month-to-month lease, utilities included. Somewhere quiet, somewhere he won't look. Use the club's emergency fund." "Doc," he said, turning to the medic, "she's going to need a job. Reach out to the Vipers in Arizona. See if that diner their chapter president's wife owns needs a manager. They owe us a favor." "Brick," he finished, "you and Rookie will trail them a few miles back. Make sure nobody follows them out of this state. You'll stay in whatever town they land in for a week. Be seen. Let the local chapter know why you're there. We're drawing a line." The men nodded. The club was mobilizing. It was a network built not just for brotherhood and riding, but for moments exactly like this. They were a system, more efficient and far more permanent than any restraining order. Meanwhile, news of what happened at the gas station spread through the small desert town like wildfire. Sal, the clerk, told everyone who came in. He described the terrified little girl, the arrogant man in the fancy car, and the silent, immovable bikers who had stood up for her when no one else knew what to do. The story changed things. The whispers that usually followed the Iron Wolves, the wary glances and locked doors, were replaced by nods of respect. At the local diner where the bikers ate breakfast the next morning, their bill was paid for by an anonymous local. The waitress kept their coffee cups full, a warm smile on her face. People saw them not as outlaws but as guardians. Sal had placed a large pickle jar on his counter with a handwritten sign, "For the mother and daughter." By the next day, it was overflowing with crumpled bills and loose change. The whole town, inspired by the bikers' actions, was rallying to help. When Ghost went to pay their tab, Sal pushed the money jar toward him. "This is for them," he said, "from all of us." 2 days later, Lena and Mia were on a bus heading east to a new life. They had a new phone, several $1,000s in cash from the town's collection, and a piece of paper with a phone number on it. "If you ever need anything, you call that number," Ghost had told Lena. "Day or night, someone will answer." A few weeks passed. Lena and Mia were settling into their new apartment in a quiet corner of Arizona. The local MC chapter had been discreetly watching over them. Lena had started her new job at the diner, and Mia was enrolled in a new school. The terror that had been a constant companion for so long was slowly beginning to recede, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. Ghost and his men had come to check on them one last time before riding out. They sat in Lena's small but clean living room, looking out of place on her floral print sofa. Lena brought them glasses of iced tea. She sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. I still don't understand," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't know us. You risked getting arrested or worse. You've given me a new life. Why? Why would you do all of this for strangers?" The room was quiet for a long moment. Brick studied the scuffs on his boots. Doc stared into his glass. It was Ghost who finally answered. He didn't look at Lena, but at a spot on the far wall, as if looking back through time. "When I was 8, he began, his voice a low rumble. "My old man had a temper. He drank a lot. I spent a lot of nights hiding in a closet listening, praying that someone, anyone, would come through the door and make it stop." He paused, his jaw tight. No one ever came. He finally turned his eyes to Lena. "Some of us," he said, gesturing to his brothers, "we know what it's like to be small and scared, to have nowhere to run and no one to call. We made a promise to ourselves and to each other that if we ever got strong enough, nobody would have to feel that way on our watch. Not if we could help it." Doc spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically thick with emotion. "I had a sister. Her husband, he was a respectable man, too, a pillar of his community. By the time we found out how bad it was too late." He looked down at his hands. "I was a medic in the Navy. I saved lives halfway across the world, but I couldn't save hers." The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. It was the heart of their code, the pain that had been forged into a shield for others. "We protect those who can't protect themselves," Ghost said, summarizing it all. "It's the only rule that really matters." Mia, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, came padding into the room. She was no longer the terrified, trembling creature from the gas station. Her eyes were bright, her smile easy. She walked straight up to Ghost, unafraid of his size or his leather vest. She held up a piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing. In it, a woman and a little girl stood behind 4 giant figures. The figures were drawn with black and gray crayon, with big boots and vests adorned with crudely drawn wolf heads. They weren't men. They were knights. They held up big shields, and on the other side of the shields, a small, angry stick figure was being washed away by a wave. "This is for you," Mia said, her voice clear and proud. "You're the Iron Wolves. You protected us." Ghost reached out and took the drawing from her small hand. He held it with a reverence usually reserved for something sacred. He looked at the drawing, then at Mia, and a rare, small smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Thank you, Mia," he said, his voice husky. "We'll keep this safe." 1 year later, the sun shone brightly on a bustling street in a pleasant Arizona suburb. Lena, her face relaxed and happy, wiped down the counter of the busy cafe she now managed. She moved with confidence, greeting customers by name. Through the large front window, she could see a nearby park, where Mia was playing on the swings with a group of friends, her laughter carrying on the breeze. There were no shadows in Mia's eyes anymore. There was no fear. They were free. Hundreds of miles away, in a clubhouse that smelled of leather, oil, and old beer, the Iron Wolves gathered for their weekly meeting. The room was loud, filled with the boisterous energy of 24 men who considered each other family. But on the main wall, in a place of honor right next to the club's official, hand-painted charter, was a simple wooden frame. Inside the frame was a child's crayon drawing of 4 knights in leather armor. It had become a legend within the club, a story told to every new prospect. It was a sacred reminder of their true purpose, hung where every member would see it every single day, a symbol of the promise they kept. Since that day at the gas station, the club's emergency fund had been used twice more, to relocate 2 other families fleeing from the kind of monsters that hide in plain sight. Their reputation had changed, evolving from feared outlaws to unlikely saviors. The world often judges by appearances, mistaking the rumble of a motorcycle for a threat and the quiet confidence of a suit for respectability. But true strength is not found in intimidation or wealth. It is measured by the choice to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves, to become a shield for the vulnerable. Real heroes are not always the ones we expect. They don't wear capes or shiny uniforms. Sometimes they wear worn leather and carry the scars of their own pasts. They answer calls for help they never expected to receive, not for glory or reward, but because they remember what it felt like to be alone and afraid. And they transform the world, not by changing everyone in it, but by fiercely protecting their small corner of it, ensuring that on their watch, the monsters do not win.